apart. So they both have two redundant programmable logic controllers, which is PLCs. They're the computers or the brains of the operation. They're the ones that receive all the information from the ride, and then they tell the rides what to do next. So in this day and age, a lot of times they use what they call safety PLCs now, so you only use one controller. But like I said, these ones were built in an era where they still use two controllers redundantly. That way, only both controllers have to agree on what they're seeing and what the next step for the ride should be. Not one controller just runs the show. It's just another level of safety. And it actually brings the old phrase, two heads are better than one, to life in a real life application. The first screen we're going to look at is a screen that gets looked at every day, all day, mostly by operations, but we in maintenance look at it too. It's the block. This is like your block zone screen, and basically it's going to show you your track layout. It's going to show you whether you're in auto mode, manual mode, or transfer mode. It's going to tell you if you have any ride errors. There's green boxes around it. The green boxes are your photo eyes. We'll talk a little bit more about them. If they're clear, they'll be green, and they'll be red if they're being flagged currently. And then you have your circles. Clear means it doesn't sense any presence there. Yellow, a filled in yellow one means that there's counts or that zone is occupied currently. This one can be good for if I come up to a ride and I know that I have a train in station and a train in transfer at this ride or waiting on Talon, and then all of a sudden I see a yellow dot somewhere out here. I already know that there's going to be an issue there, because this should already be clear if both trains are home already. The next screen we're going to look at is the error display screen. Another pretty important screen, especially for us in maintenance when we come to a ride. I would say we view it about 99% of the time on a ride call. And basically it's kind of what it sounds like. Your error numbers will be up here. It'll tell you what your error number is. This will be your message. It'll basically tell you what the ride thought it saw, or what it thought the problem was. Then it'll tell you roughly what action to take, right? It's not 100% accurate, but it'll roughly tell you what to do to fix the problem. And then it'll tell you what procedure it is to restart once you've corrected the issue. And then this box down here, you can't read it. It's an error lookup button. So if I would press that button after clearing the alarms, it'll bring up a keypad. I can type in an error number, and then I can review it afterwards. So in some cases that'd be nice. That's good, where I can come up, I can quick write down the error number, and then I can restart the ride, get the guests off, and then I can look it up afterwards. That way we're trying to get people off the ride as quickly and safely as we can. Alright, this is the proximity switch and photo eyes screen that we use. It breaks the whole ride down into sections, and then each section has a subsection. So we have like your service brake has your approach, which is before it actually comes into the brake zone. Then you have your enter, and then you have your exit. This screen here is primarily just train detection. Where is it at on the track? How many cars have passed by, etc. So anything that's clear is blank, and then you have your two filled in yellow dots here. That just means those sets of contacts are giving input back to the PLC at that time. Your photo eye blocks, again, they'll be red if they're flagged and green if they're clear. This screen is good for trying to help determine if you have a bad sensor. Like if one is flagged all the time, the dot will appear yellow all the time, even if it shouldn't be. Or in this case, this one would be off because it's normally on. So that's kind of what we use this screen for. This screen here is the axle counter screen. This is another pretty important screen that goes kind of hand in hand with the last one. So each section has its subsections, like I said. So this one has approach A and B in a 0, P10203, which would be A, and 20203, which would be B. the way the sensors are set up for train detection is there's one on the left side, one on the right side, and they're staggered. And they read the wheel assemblies as they go by to basically tell you how many cars it's seen. So the way it should work is you should get 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, until you get up to 8. So ideally, when a train goes by, you should have 8 counts on both of these sensors, and then the computer should do the math and get to 16. 8 and 8 is 16. Where this comes into handy, and is where this is important, is the way the system counts that total value to 16 is when they get flagged in the appropriate fashion. So if I have a sensor that may be starting to fail, it might count once out of sequence, and my total counts might only be 15, but my 2 proxies will say they both have 8, and the math doesn't work, right? 8 and 8 is not 15. So that's another way that we can determine if we maybe have a faulty sensor in the zone, is if your counts aren't adding up right, or if you have a prox that just doesn't count to 8 at all, maybe it only counts to 6. You know, that could be a good place to start depending on what the issue is. And then the other important thing is, if the counts are not correct, that area of the track will not clear when it reaches a predetermined point. So I could have, so let's just say it's the service area here. If my approach only adds 8 and 8, but only gets to 15, this area is going to stay occupied. So the next train I send out of the station and go to the lift, it's going to go 3/4 of the way to the top, and it's going to stop because it thinks that this area is still occupied. So, and it won't let a train enter it. So it's very important to make sure that the counts are correct. And that's one of the reasons why when there is a stoppage, sometimes it seems like it takes a while to get the ride restarted. Is depending on what the issue is, we try and go through as many of these screens as we can, because sometimes, especially on an intermittent problem, the only time to really get the information you need is when it happens. And if it's not going to happen for another 2 hours, you're just not going to make any headway. So, but that's important to know about the axle counter screen. And then each zone has its own specific diagnostic screen. Where this screen is important is this one doesn't really show you block information like the rest of the ones we've been talking about. This one will show you, like, if you have a brake solenoid, this screen will tell you if the PLC is telling it to be open or closed. It'll tell you if the prox for the brake is showing the brake open or closed. If you have cylinders, like for the combs, every cylinder has little sensors on it that tells it what position the cylinder is in. That's all the kind of stuff you would see on like a diagnostic screen. So on this one, for example, there's a solenoid here for opening and closing a motor group, and then there's sensors for whether or not the cylinder is in the right spot. This will also tell you if motor disconnects are turned off or tripped or something like that. That's stuff that you wouldn't see on those other more block information related type screens. So this one can be important for those smaller errors, like, oh, I told the brake to be open, but this prox didn't read that it was open, so I throw an error. And so this screen can help determine whether or not we have a bad sensor as far as on a cylinder or something like that.
Remain seated, facing forward, keeping your head against the headrest and your hands and arms inside the